All right, welcome back again. Let's dive into more AI inspirations and see what we can find here that's interesting. If any of these topics are fascinating to you, if you want to dive in a little deeper, let me know in the comments, because I would love to actually do a live stream or just make a full video dedicated to any one of these subjects or all of the subjects. So first things first, what does YouTube recommend? Your own coin, the creator economy explored. We also have Beyond the Chart, Volume Tells All, AI-driven crypto trading bots explored, quantum computing's threat to blockchain security, Rune's latest premier minting event deep dive. Let's dive into each of these topics, and I would love to hear your feedback on each of them. But let's dive into number one, your own crypto coins. Now, this is the beauty of tokenization. First of all, for anybody that is holding BLND, the BRC20 on Bitcoin, shout out to you. Drop a comment. Let us know when you minted, if you bought off secondary, if you minted. And more than that, join us in the community at the link in the description so you can claim your role and get access to the various channels. Now, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, just go back and look more into the blends, mega blends, and understand what the BLND token is all about. It's essentially a membership, as discussed in a previous video about digital asset tokenization. So now here we go. Your own coin. The beautiful thing about your own coin is that you don't necessarily have to make it about money. For myself and yourselves in the community, BLND is essentially a membership. It's going to give access to other drops. Perhaps it gives access to alpha, my research. It definitely gives access to my research, my buy calls, things that I find are exciting, things that I believe will make you better in this digital asset world, right? So you can create your own token and you don't necessarily need a whole lot of money. As a matter of fact, with these minting services, let's say on Bitcoin, and maybe eventually coming to stuff like Abstract through Bitcoin and things like that, you have the ability to mint a token, and essentially it has $0 value until you actually press sell or decide to list it on a secondary market. So that's kind of fantastic in the sense that now, but the thing is though, let's go back before I talk about why that's so fantastic. The trouble is there that you have no liquidity potentially. And so you need to find some type of liquidity, bootstrap some liquidity to put in pools to make it more tradable. But at the same time, when you have things like inscriptions or JSON data or BRC20 tokens, maybe even Runes tokens, Alkanes, and all these different standards on Bitcoin, a lot of these don't necessarily require anything other than for you to list it and somebody else to want to buy it. So these tokens can actually be very similar to, let's say, NFT art. You could make a picture, put it on a blockchain and sell it. And as long as somebody wants to buy it, they want to buy it. I foresee businesses using these tokens as a way to create a community for themselves, as a way to reward their users, their customers, with an innovative way of essentially tallying, calculating, accumulating points and rewards. And of course, this is directly on chain. So, you might go to the grocery store with some coupons, or you may scan your wallet or some type of barcode, as you guys obviously know, that's going to, essentially link to your profile, and they'll see exactly how much you have on chain. It's immutable evidence. So I believe that whole, like, your own creator token, we got things like Zora from Ethereum. There are so many people who are making tokens over there. I mentioned a lot of Bitcoin stuff as usual because, that's the main chain. And if you're not understanding what's happening on Bitcoin, then I genuinely think you're kind of lost in the blockchain world if you think it's just all about dollars. On Bitcoin, it's a little bit different. But there's, of course, monetization aspects, opportunities for them. There are ways that you can reward your community with them. There are ways you can use it as memberships, like the BLND token, so much more. Guys, let me know your comments and your thoughts on your personal creator coins, things like that, right? Let's dive on to the charts and volume. So let's talk about market cap. When I think about volume, it's so important. And when I think about market cap, asset valuations, and what's cheap and what's not, you really have to be looking at, yes, the volume is super critical, but you really have to be looking at the levels of liquidity that are available for this particular asset. The lower the liquidity is, the higher risk it is, but the higher the risk it is also directly correlates to how quickly this thing can multiply up or down. Essentially, how much, you can go down 90%, then you can go down another 90% from that point. You're at $100, you go down to 10 cents. You can go from 10 cents to 1 penny. You can go from 1 penny to 1/10 of a penny. You can keep going down 90% all the way. But when you go up, the downside is pretty powerful. don't get me wrong, it's absolutely really, really powerful. But when you have the right entry on something that's low liquidity, the upside is absolutely fantastic. So definitely understanding volume, not watching so much market cap, because you can manipulate the market cap by burning tokens, by issuing new tokens. It totally changes the market cap and may push you up on page one. Look at the volume, absolutely, to understand where these spikes are coming from, where the dips are coming from, and they're likely led by the market maker. And of course, we're talking about Aladdin by BlackRock, essentially what most of these tokens are using to move their markets, to market make their asset, right? To find those levels. And like I always said in my previous videos, you got to know your targets, know your levels. Don't get misled by market capitalization. That is really kind of one of the most useless metrics that you could really look at to determine anything. Because look at the market cap of Bitcoin, look at the +2, -2 depth, percentage that it takes to move the price. Let's say 2%. It could be hundreds of thousands of dollars, but still you'll see Bitcoin pump 30% in a month or 5 days. It's not so much about the market cap in any way. It's about the liquidity levels and, of course, the volume that comes in to make these levels. So trading on diagonals is typically not recommended unless you're focusing more on retail patterns. And this is not to downplay anybody's skills or anything, but you really have to kind of graduate away from these retail chart patterns and start to understand how the volume affects things, yes, but also more specifically, the levels are so important. And of course, the volume is what creates these levels. Let's dive into the next topic, guys. Let me know your thoughts. What are you trading? Are you trading diagonals? Are you trading support and resistance? Are you trading, flags and so on? Let me know your thoughts, all right? Let's dive in. AI-driven crypto trading bots explored. I'm totally 100% into the idea of using trading bots, especially if you know your targets and you know your levels. This is where, and you know where your liquidity is above price and below price. Once you find a certain range on these assets, you can go ahead and set a bot. And as long as you set your grid bot, let's say 200 or 300, 250, let's say, buys and sells, that on the grid, that is, and you've got your targets above and below price where liquidity is, and you understand levels. We're not talking about diagonals again. Absolutely, trading bots are the way to go, because they can supplement your trading if you're having a bad week, provided that you find the right entry and the right levels. They can also provide you with some peace of mind, because whilst you're sleeping or you're working on something else, you've got this thing actually moving for you and essentially paying for your actions, your efforts, while you're not available. So there's beauty in that. And again, knowing your levels is super critical with this idea. And I love the idea of, with bots, how you can actually manage your risk. Again, you don't have to be overly leveraging. I personally think when you're doing grid bots, you probably want to be doing 3% or 3x leverage, maybe 4, maybe 5. The more risk you put in is the more you could potentially lose or make. But to my mind, grid bots are meant to, for the way I would use them, is meant to kind of take away the stress and the pressure from finding the exact right entry. You can find a great trade if you find a peak formation low or peak formation high, you're trying to go short. But if you find a good solid range, you put your chart to the 4-hour, let's say, or even the daily, and you find a certain range that this asset has been moving in for several months, you might as well just start, set up a grid bot right above price, somewhere above price. Look for some vector candles, and below price, look for some long wicks where traders have been trapped, where they may not actually get released. And you set your levels, 200, 250, maybe 300 grids there, levels, and essentially just let the AI work for you. That is beautiful. All right, let's dive into quantum computing. The idea is that a threat to blockchain security. So Vitalik Buterin, the main founder of Ethereum, says that essentially by 2030, quantum computers are going to essentially crack these, blockchains wide open, not in not so many words, but essentially, yeah. So do I believe that's going to happen? No. It's kind of like the Y2K idea. As soon as it hit 12 o'clock in everybody's nation, they checked to see if their phones worked or their computer was okay and this and that. I'm pretty sure we'll be working our butts off and our brains out to ensure that this doesn't happen, to ensure that we are prepared. But I tell you what, this is a great marketing tool. This is an absolutely fantastic way to get people scared and to promote your product, to let them know just how good what you're doing is and how secure what you're building is and will be. I personally do not believe we will be in a position where blockchains are just totally hacked. unless we are doing this because we want this to be the case. Now, I know that kind of sounds like I'm riding the fence somewhere. No, I genuinely don't think we're going to be anywhere near that. I think we're going to find a way to work around it. And if we don't, yes, I will believe that there is essentially some plan to make us vulnerable. And that would be kind of like the ultimate shift, transition, wealth transition has completed. Everybody's on chain. Everybody lost a bunch of stuff. Their data's totally leaked and all this stuff. There's no hiding. You need to run to the system to get your security because they have everything. It's just, maybe I'm just like a doom and gloomer, but that's kind of what I see. Let me know more about your thoughts. I think the idea of quantum computing is fantastic and fascinating because these computers can theoretically and maybe actually do things faster, millions or billions of times faster than what we can currently do with our present setups, right? So that alone is incredible. We're already talking about the idea of your productivity being increased, augmented exponentially because of artificial intelligence if you leverage it well. So artificial intelligence with quantum computing, with immutability on these ledgers, at this rate, if we're not winning, then it's simply because we are resisting. That's my thought on that. Let me know your thoughts. And finally, Rune's latest premier minting event deep dive. Now, let me just say this right now. Is there any interest in Runes on Bitcoin? Well, the answer is yes. We've got Alkanes. We've got so many other token standards. I don't want to name them all. BRC20, BRC 2.0. There will be more. These are just a few. And I can guarantee that within weeks or months, there will be more. There's LRC20 now. There's so many. But that goes to show that liquidity is so powerful and Bitcoin has a lot of it. So that's why these token standards can continue to exist. You have ordinals, you have orbitals, you have atomicals, you have so many other, asset classes, I suppose I could say, altcoins on Bitcoin. These ones can attract as much liquidity as some of your favorite altcoin ecosystems on their own. So it's fascinating to essentially be out of Bitcoin completely. It just, to my mind, it's actually rather fascinating. Runes was designed to be an airdrop tool, pump and dump mechanism. Now I'm kind of exaggerating, but I did mention in the previous video that Runes was essentially going to usher in one of the biggest meme coin seasons, and it would be on Bitcoin. And that's really slow and may not have even happened yet, but only time will tell. But moreover, Runes would be a big pump and dump. More than a pump, it would be more like a dump, since there's so much airdropping. Now, guys, what happens when there's something free? Typically, people sell it. That's just the reality. And it takes a lot of liquidity to bring it in. You can look at some charts and see when the price is down 20%, 30, 40%. It doesn't take 20, 30, 40% to push it back up to parity. It takes much more. And as you get to like 95%, it's exponential. 98% is even more X's to get back to zero. So Runes is really a dump on a lot of the community. And in my mind, a lot of these companies, maybe it would be something like Magic Eden and a lot of other even wallets that don't support BRC20 anymore. At least they don't support it in the UI, on the front end, so you can actually see the asset. Of course, you can send your assets to the wallet, your Taproot wallet address as an example, and you'll still see it. Some of these wallets and some of these platforms no longer support BRC20 at all. It seems like there's an effort to gatekeep that asset class. And selectively, people can select, these creators, these platforms can select the token standard that they want. Which one is marketing? Which one is, there's LRC20, there seems to be a lot of money behind that. Maybe even Alkanes, there seems to be some money behind that. And it doesn't mean that these token standards aren't good, but they may not necessarily be organic. So I know diving into Runes, the idea of what is the next premier mint event? Well, we had great platforms like Genie Data, Unisat, there's, Satoshi, there's so many that were great. A lot of them no longer exist, or they are there, but they're just kind of just there. It's because in a way, there's just not enough interest. There's not enough volume coming in. I feel like Runes relies so much on marketing and advertising, whereas a lot of the other token standards rely on the mempool. When you understand that dynamic of watching the mempool to see what's hot, watching different explorers and different people have created ordinals, mempools, where you can view the ordinals, the art that's coming out, it's the biggest billboard of all. on Bitcoin. It's real time and it's really slow, as people love to talk about. It's so slow. But imagine you get to see this slow train moving by, and you get to see all the interesting passengers and all the graffiti, maybe even graffiti, or maybe all of the the designs that are put on this train as it goes by. Right? You got bullet trains like Solana and Ethereum and all these other networks that are so fast you don't get to see it. You don't have a chance of seeing what's in those blocks. But with Bitcoin, you get a chance to see what's happening in every single block, and you can decide for yourself if there's anything interesting. So that's one thing about runes. It takes away maybe the technical side of Bitcoin, the fun of it, the underground aspect of it, perhaps the user focused, intentional dedication to finding what's new. It takes that away in some way, and kind of more aims, it targets the idea of ease of use and airdropping. But my thoughts on airdropping is that they're typically just going to dump. For the most part, 30 to 70% of people are going to dump. I know that's a really big range, but that's just what I anticipate. So when it comes to the mechanics of mints, you definitely want to mint early, because if something, depending on if it's going to do well, which again, you might want to check the mempool to see how it's minting, which is too technical for some people, too hands-on for some people. But the winners know how to win on Bitcoin, and they won't waste their time trying to speculate with high leverage in other places, because they know how to use the mempool. A lot of times you want to monitor how something's minting and notice the mempool. Is the mempool fee getting higher and higher? Goodness, if it starts at 3 sats and suddenly after 20 or maybe an hour, this thing is minting, and now it's suddenly at 12 sats, 15 sats. Well, look, if I minted mine at 3 sats and you minted yours at 12 sats per VByte, then yeah, I minted mine 4 times cheaper than you did. That's just the reality in terms of sats, right? And of course, maybe there's a standard fee for the platform, but when it comes to listing the assets, a lot of times these miners seem to have some preferential treatment, some front-running capability. They're able to mint a huge percent of the supply at the lowest sat rate, maybe 1 or even less, and they just sell it 3, 4, 5x, 2x, even 30 to 50% more than what they bought it for. So instead of you actually going to mint it, you might just want to buy it off the secondary. Guys, I dive into runes and this exact topic in another video, so definitely check out my thoughts on runes and how to win, because it's not all bad. But with runes, you got to play the game. It's a game. You got to be tricky. You got to be cunning. You got to know when you should actually mint or when you should actually just sweep from the secondary market, because the minting cost to mint a fresh batch of tokens may actually be more expensive than getting it from the secondary market. So you guys let me know your thoughts. I would be so happy to hear what you think about, your own coin in this creator economy, volume and how that affects charts and the movement, of course, by the market makers. AI-driven crypto trading bots. I want to know your thoughts on grid bots and things like that. Quantum computing and the threats it has to our security with Bitcoin and other assets, blockchains generally speaking. And of course, runes, essentially, what's the hot mint, how to mint, when to mint, should you mint, and essentially how to win with runes. Guys, check you in the next one. Let's win together.